everyone. Hello, everyone, once again. You're all very welcome to this webinar organized by the European Network on Independent Living. My name is Ines Bulic-Jocariu. I'm the director of ENIL, and I will be moderating today's webinar. The topic that we will be dealing with today is an important one. It's the use or misuse of the European Union funds. We are very happy to be finally launching a report called I'm Here for Life, Study Visit on the Misuse of EU Funding to Advance Deinstitutionalization in Bulgaria. This report is part of ENIL's long-term work monitoring the use of EU funds in relation to the rights of persons with disabilities is the result of a study visit that took place last year in October, where my colleagues went to institutions and daycare centers for disabled people. So you will hear, this is what you will hear about. It's an important piece of work. ENIL has been monitoring the use of EU funds across Europe, but we have done we have done some work on Bulgaria before. We have had a case at the General Court in Luxembourg challenging the misuse of EU funds. Unfortunately, the case has been unsuccessful, but we continue this work. Our aim is not just to uncover the misuse of EU funds, but of course, to ensure that funds are used better to advance the right to independent living for all disabled people in Bulgaria. So before we get started and I introduce our speakers today and the agenda, a couple of housekeeping rules or matters. So we have interpretation into Bulgarian today. If you would like to use this interpretation, there is a little globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You have to click on that and you have to choose the Bulgarian channel. If you will be listening in English, you please choose the English channel. We have automated captions today into English. So while we are speaking English, you can click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen and use that. We are in the webinar format today, which means that you cannot come in and speak. You can certainly raise your hand when we come to the time for discussion, but you can also use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen throughout the webinar to ask a question, or of course, feel free to use the chat box. We will be posting some information in the chat box as we go along. I think that is all for housekeeping. We will be recording this webinar for those who were not able to join today, and we will be posting it on ENIL's YouTube channel. I think that is really now about it. We will have two speakers today. The author of the report, my colleague Rita Crespo Fernandez. She will tell you all about it in a bit. And another speaker, Mitko Nikolov, from the member of ENIL in Bulgaria, the Center for Independent Living, Sofia. So you will hear from both of them. We also really encourage you to engage with us, to ask anything else you might be interested in, or to make any comments. We will be starting with a little video that my colleague Rita will play to introduce the report. So Rita, please go ahead.
We often hear about Bulgaria being a leading example of deinstitutionalization in Europe. But has Bulgaria really closed all of its institutions? We have come here to visit 3 small group homes and 2 daycare centers where disabled people still live segregated from their community with little control over their lives. Speaking with independent living experts and human rights lawyers, we have understood that institutionalization and coercive measures are still being used. Let's learn more about this.
Not a good example or model of the institutionalization. We change only the name of institution from big institution to small group homes.
We visit several places, including places where people from big institutions I know very well had been transferred, and I can see that there is a huge improvement in the conditions. There are new buildings, washing machines, rooms are better, but that's it.
The government spent money only for buildings with new beds or kitchen or etc. But nothing changed as a policy. They have a staff there which is not prepared, not educated about what is the independent living means.
When you are restricting someone when to get up, or where to eat, what drinks to have, this is a form of coercion that it could constitute domestic violence or other form of illegal coercion, but it's not recognized as such when the person is in psychiatric hospital or in a institution.
They give support only in the institutions, and this person with disability knows very well, and everyone person with disability knows that if they don't have a family, the alternative is institutions. I need to try personal assistant, but with low cost of the per hour. I need to pay for my packet for good personal assistant, and if I don't work to possible to pay this money for my packet, I don't have choice. I need to go to the institution.
Do you think the European Union could do, or do you think they could help?
They need to stop funding this policy in Bulgaria and ask our government what you do in another way to support people with disability outside of institutions.
We have seen that Bulgaria has spent millions of euros into building small group homes for disabled people, daycare centers and other segregated settings. These places are dangerous and harmful for disabled people as they lack choice and control over their lives. Bulgaria is not an isolated example, but there is a trend in all of Europe to build small group homes to replace large institutions. In these places, independent living cannot be ensured. Therefore, we call on the European Commission to stop promoting Bulgaria as an example of deinstitutionalization, to act strongly when funds are being misused, and to put in place safeguards in the regulations so these investments can be prevented. If you want to learn more, read our report.
Thank you, Rita. You saw Rita in the video, and Mitko, very important words and a call to do things better in Bulgaria. But now you will hear about why. So what did Rita and colleagues find in Bulgaria when they went there in October? Where did they go? What did they see? Who did they talk to? So I'm very also personally curious to hear more. Rita, please go ahead and introduce the report to us.
Thank you, Ines. I will share my screen so everybody can see the presentation. Let me know if it works properly. Can you see the slides?
Yes, if you could just make it full. That's it. Yeah, now it's good.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you, Ines, and thank you everybody for being with us today. I am very glad to present this report. It's done by ENIL with the support of the Network of Independent Experts, and it's called I'm Here for Life, as Ines said. It's a study visit on the misuse of EU funding to advance institutionalization in Bulgaria. This is a picture of the cover of the report. I think this picture speaks very loudly. It's a dark corridor of one of the small group homes we visited with a window at the end. And I think it transmits the atmosphere that we perceived when we were in these places. The report is named after one quote we heard ourselves from one of the residents of this small group home, the same one that is in the picture. The quote says, "For me, it's the same. The institution was my home. The small group home is my home. I'm here for life." And to us, this showed that people truly feel that there's no alternative in Bulgaria and that there is no difference between an institution and a small group home. It's the same. So why did we decide to do this report in particular? First, both ENIL and NIE have been working, often together also, as watchdogs regarding the use of EU funds to invest in segregation for disabled people. Ines already introduced this. When I first started working on this topic at ENIL, I noticed very quickly that for the independent living movement, it is extremely clear. Small group homes, daycare centers, sheltered workshops, these are not independent living. These do not comply with the convention. But this is not clear to people working outside of the movement. People go, experts of EU funds, they go visit these places because they go visit these places. And what they see is new buildings that look fine, and they don't see the problem behind it. So we wanted to go and witness with our own eyes and to transmit what we see as experts and transmit this to everybody. The other factor that was important in choosing Bulgaria in particular is that Bulgaria has been promoted as a positive example of the institutionalization, because Bulgaria committed to closing all of its baby homes, institutions for children, and institutions for adults. There has been advances, particularly in terms of non-disabled children, but we perceive that in terms of disabled children and adults, what has been happening is a transformation of large institutions into smaller institutions. And we want to stop promoting Bulgaria as an example of a success of the institutionalization. So this is why we decided to do this visit. For the study visit, we visited 3 small group homes and 2 daycare centers in the province of Kyustendil in Bulgaria. It was our NIE colleagues that helped us contact these places and get us inside. There is a map in this slide of Bulgaria where you can see where Kyustendil is located. It's in western Bulgaria. It's not too far from Sofia and is close to the border with North Macedonia. So in this visit, we also interviewed multiple people. During the visits themselves, we interviewed the management, the staff, and the residents or users. For this, also NIE helped us with the interpretation. We also interviewed people with lived experience that were not in these particular places we visited. We interviewed experts on independent living and also experts on the Bulgarian legal system. When we came back to Brussels, we interviewed the European Commission staff. And also, we had a meeting with the Commission of Protection Against Discrimination to raise this question with them. I want to show you a few pictures from the visit. Not all of them are in the report, some are not, so some of them are exclusive to this presentation. This is the first small group home we visited. There is a building with a gate and a few of us standing outside of the gate. This is the 3 of us from the monitoring visit, Aneta, Tanya, and I, and 2 of the residents, so we were just chatting with them. This was the first place we visited and we were quite surprised. The place itself was not the best conditions because there was a mix of adults and children living together. There were 14 people from 8 years old to 38, mostly men, but 2 women also. But we felt that the management was quite aware of the problem, not only regarding the age, but also regarding the fact that the system is not working. They kept complaining that these stays were meant to be temporary, that they had people come in and never leave, and that they didn't see any evolution. They were saying in particular for disabled people, there was no evolution. They were also saying that they were incapable of supporting people because they had very different disabilities. And to me, what this spoke about is the lack of individualized support for each person. They had limited amount of staff and they could not support everyone. This is the living room from this first small group home with one of the residents. There was a TV and some sofas. This is Aneta and I speaking with the management. She was the institution manager, who was again quite critical of the system. There was a kitchen inside, although they also, most of these places use catering, but they did a snack every afternoon together. one of the bedrooms. All of the bedrooms had 2 or 3 beds. And we noticed that there was, in some of them, not a lot of personal stuff. The bedrooms looked quite tidy and clean. This one, you can see there was also a wheelchair. Now we moved to the first daycare center we visited. It was also in the same town as it was in Dubnica. And we were also quite shocked by this place, but negatively. I had the maybe wrong expectations that daycare centers would not be as bad as small group homes in my mind. I was completely wrong. This place shocked me also first because you can see in the picture there's a lot of people in one room. There were way too many people in one place. You can see there's, I don't know, about 15 people all sitting in tables. In this place, they were all adults. They were staying either half day or the whole day. And they were mostly doing crafting or drawing or this kind of activities. There is an example here of some of this crafting. There is a puzzle solved of 2 dogs and some sort of crafting of fish and a pond. There was a lot of crafting. I would believe not every disabled person likes to craft, but in these daycare centers and small group homes, everybody crafts, everybody does knitting, drawing. So you can see there is a limitation in the activities people can do. In this same daycare center, we found that there was like this sort of medical room and there was somebody sleeping in it, taking a nap. This is another picture from the daycare center where there's a group of women knitting. Knitting was quite present, especially among women. I cannot say because I'm not Bulgarian if this is just a very popular thing in Bulgaria, but this was certainly everywhere in the small group homes and daycare centers. This is the second small group home we visited. It was in the village of Rila. This place was quite interesting. First, because this was where people had been transferred from the institution in Pastra. This is an institution where human rights violations have been recorded. There has been a case brought by Validity and by NIE, the Stanev case, and there is good recording of these human rights violations, and there were 40 people per room with a total of, I think, 100 or 120 people living there. They've been transferred to several small group homes. This is one of them. In this case, there are actually 2 small group homes in one. In the same building, there are 2 homes. Legally, this works because to be considered a small group home, you need to be under 14 people. So you have 2 in the same building, but they're separate. But we saw that everybody was together, really. So I would count it as a 27 people institution, but well, legally it doesn't. One of the bedrooms of this small group home. We had a very interesting experience in here. We don't have any pictures of the residents of this one, but when we entered one of the bedrooms to speak with a resident, Aneta was helping also interpret, and there was another resident laying on the bed. He had his eyes open, but he did not seem to notice us. We were there for 10 minutes, did not look at us, did not talk to us. We were under the impression that person was probably sedated, probably using some sort of medication. They had this sort of gaming room. Something that I noticed very distinctly is how tidy everything is. My brother lives in an institution. I've been there many times unannounced because I'm a family member. I wouldn't say it's dirty, but it's not tidy because there's 30 people living in one place. It's just impossible that everything is tidy all the time. So something I notice is how much they prepare the visits, probably, to have this gaming room so beautifully done and tidy. This is a medical room. There is like some sort of medical bed to lay on in the same small group home, but all the small group homes had some sort of medical room too. They all said they work with doctors, and some of them also work with psychiatrists. The third small group home visited, this was a complex of multiple small group homes. There were 3 in the same place, so there's these 3 little buildings together. And there were 14 persons in each of them. So as with the last one, even though each of them is a separate small group homes, they are together. In the picture, there is also a European Union flag because this was funded by the European Union, and a Bulgarian flag. And in the picture, we're also speaking with the management. The corridor of the small group home, this is a pretty regular corridor. It has handles to support with. And there were a lot of drawings and pictures of their trips. We could see in these pictures that were in the corridor that they were at this, all of the residents traveled to a petting zoo. We were quite shocked because they told us that it was such a good experience because they could see all of the animals running around freely. And we thought that it was very, very ironic that, that they told us this. This is in the same small group home, multiple drawings done by one resident. There were so many drawings, a lot of craft. I think this was present everywhere. To us, this was very childlike because all of the residents in this one were adults. They were women with intellectual disabilities, but all adults. And there was still a lot of like childlike things, drawings, puzzles. These were done mostly by one user who actually gifted us some of these drawings, and there were also some sort of sport machines there. And lastly, this is the last daycare center we visited. It was a daycare center for older people with dementia. You know, there were some people that were not that didn't have dementia. This was also funded by the European Union. Crafting here was everywhere, specifically knitting. I think because they were mostly women. And there's this, I guess this, I don't know if it's culturally a thing to knit in Bulgaria. I apologize if it is. But it was everywhere for us. We were a bit shocked about this. And they even had a list of sort of fake prices for people to feel like it was a job. They also had beds. This is a picture with multiple beds in one room. I think there were about 8 beds in each room. It looks quite tidy, and it was for people to nap. They didn't live there, it was just to nap. And this was a fake bus stop for the people with dementia, to feel like there was an end of the day, we understood. So now that we're done with the pictures, I will go through the outcomes of the report. First is about the use of EU funding. This is a picture also in the screen of one of the signs in one of the places visited that describes the specific program under which it was funded. So from all of these visits and the interviews, we understand that the implementations of Bulgaria's deinstitutionalization strategy has been largely financed by European Union's cohesion funding, mainly by 2 programs, which are the Human Resources Development, that is under the European Social Fund, and Regions in Growth, which is under the European Regional Development Fund. From the conversations we had with the Commission, we understand that in the future there's going to be more involvement from the Human Resources Development because the places have already been built. We can expect, though, that there will still be investments in daycare centers and there will still be investments in home care. Not so much into building new small group homes, as I say, they already exist. And the other thing we found is the key role that EU funds play in building these places. A lot of them use EU funding. EU funding has really taken a huge role in providing the resources and also in these places, I believe, having such a beautiful outlook without creating independent living. Trying to pass. Okay. Something that is extremely important that I already discussed is the trans-institutionalization. For those who don't know, trans-institutionalization means transferring residents from large institutions into small institutions. It's the same culture, it's still an institution, but the place is smaller. There are fewer residents in each. So we see that this is a widespread measure for disabled people in particular. But we also see that there were new entries in some of the cases, specifically in the one for children. We found that the staff and the management were often the same. Sometimes there were also new staff, but that often they kept the same people. And we believe this was also key in transferring the culture from large institutions into smaller institutions. So this is another thought that we didn't hear much about having some sort of training on independent living for this staff or but also it's a problem in how much leadership they took. Because when we were discussing with the management of these institutions, they mostly had already been in the big institution that existed before, either as managers or staff. And they talked about how much of a role they played in the institutionalization or so-called institutionalization. This is not what true deinstitutionalization is. In true deinstitutionalization, you need leadership from survivors, you need leadership from disabled people, you need true leadership of the people that are gonna be experiencing the change. But this is not what happened in Bulgaria. The staff and the management, the local authorities, they were the ones doing these strategies and putting them in place and implementing them. And the last thing is that sometimes these temporary stays, because sometimes they're named as temporary, they become permanent. This is a discussion we had quite a lot with in the first small group homes, that these were children. They were supposed to be a small group home for children. Some of them were transferred as children and they were still living there as adults. 10 years later, they were still in the same place. And if not, they will be transferred to another small group home. There is no view of people leaving the small group homes, just to go from large institution to small group home and maybe to another small group home after that. The next thing is that there is still a lack of choice and control over the services, over the lives, over everything when people are in these small group homes and daycare centers. There are mandatory regimes. In all of them, there were mandatory regimes. In the small group homes, I mean, you wake up at a certain hour, you have meals at a certain hour, and you do the activities you're told to do. Maybe you go to a daycare center if you're in a small group home, maybe you don't. But everybody does the same thing at the time they're told to do it. They dictate people's lives. You saw in the video we put in the beginning how one of the lawyers we interviewed, Elena, was saying that in cases of domestic violence, mandatory regimes would be considered a crime because they restrict people's lives. It's a form of oppression and coercion over the person. Then I also named this already, there's such a limited range of activities that people could access. It was mostly crafting, it was mostly knitting. There were often also these pseudo-therapeutic activities, some sort of therapies with people that didn't have enough training to do this. Or they were also a bit too childlike with all of these drawings and all of these kind of illustrations that were animated for children. There is a picture here of multiple sensory room elements. There was a sensory room in the first daycare center we visited, and it was quite of a funny situation because we got in, so they would show it to us, and there was somebody watching TV. They turn off the TV and they start turning on all of these little sensory machines. So we saw that there was no real use. A sensory room maybe is not necessarily a bad thing in itself, but we saw that maybe it was not used or not used appropriately. And the last thing is that unsupervised outings are very limited, but in the small group homes in particular. And they do these like coordinated activities where they go out all together. But for people to be able to go out freely, and especially to have support to go out, that would be something else. This is way more restricted. The only place where people were completely allowed to go freely was the first small group home, where anybody over 12 was able to exit at any time. But some people needed support and we were not sure how this was being done. And something that was also interesting is that in the second small group home we visited, we asked if people could go out freely. And they replied no, because they all go out and buy cigarettes and gather trash in the cans. We were quite puzzled by this thought. But maybe it was some consequence of the traumatic experience at the large institution. Maybe they didn't have access to whatever they needed. We are not very sure of why this behavior happened. But we also disagree with the idea that people are not able to go outside and buy cigarettes if they want. They were all adults. If they want to smoke cigarettes, they should be allowed to smoke cigarettes because everybody else is. Another thing I want to mention is about the culture of violence, which I think is still pervasive, mainly in all the small group homes. When we asked about crisis situations, they talked about transfers in crisis situations to psychiatric hospitals. As I said before, they also work with psychiatrists, although they were not necessarily people with psychosocial disabilities. But we were quite afraid of this situation, specifically regarding children. We know that psychiatric hospitals are dangerous places where coercive measures are used quite largely. And we also felt that when we asked about if people consent to be put in psychiatric hospitals on wards, They did not even understand the question. They referred to their families. They said, we asked the families, we asked the guardians, but they didn't even understand the notion that a person can consent for themselves. And guardianship indeed is something that here is very important, not only for this particular question, but also in terms of justice. When people are victims of violence and they're under guardianship, it becomes much more difficult to access justice in terms of also being able to be a witness in court or to declare in court, to start a claim. Prosecutors may not take the claims as seriously. So it is something that is still happening in Bulgaria, but there's both partial and full guardianship, and it is something that is quite restrictive for residents and users. And the last thing, I already kind of touched upon this. We wanted to ask if people had a trauma-informed approach. Most people, when we were discussing with the management and the staff, they were referring to extremely traumatic situations, sometimes inside of the small group home, sometimes before they got into the small group home. Some of them came from these large institutions, and that in itself is traumatic. But there was not such an understanding of trauma as something that could affect the residents. So we felt like there was a bit of a misunderstanding. There was this phrase that was said multiple times, and I put it in the slide. The care in the large institution was good. Only the infrastructure was inadequate. We heard this from multiple institution management. They recognize that the conditions in the institutions, in the large institutions, were not good. They recognize it. But they kept insisting that these people were not subject to inhumane or degrading treatment, that there was no torture, that there was no human rights abuses in there. The only issue is that there were too many people in one place, that the buildings were old. So there was a lack of recognition of institutionalization as something that is traumatic and that affects people. And lastly, I will not go much into this because then we have Mitko that can tell us much more, is that people cannot live in the community. The institution often is the only solution because there's not enough alternatives. There's not enough personal assistant. There's not enough funding of personal assistance to pay somebody outside the family. The disability assistance scheme is also too low for the cost of living, and that makes small group homes the only solution. And also, there's not enough accessible housing. When we had an interview with two residents of a care and small group home, they mentioned this as one of the reasons they needed to stay in a small group home, because when they first exited a small group home, they found themselves getting kicked out of the only accessible apartment they could find. They talked to the social services, and the social services said, you need to go back into the small group home. There's no other option. There's no accessible housing you can get into. So there is a quote here from Stefan, who we also interviewed for this report. And he said, without a job, people fall into survival mode. With a job, many fear losing the small support they have. Because as support is means tested, you can potentially lose the few things you're getting. And in this situation, people end up institutionalized. I will now just quickly go through the recommendations. When we did this report, we were addressing to multiple people. So first, to the European Commission, we want to stop Bulgaria being this positive example of the institutionalization, especially of disabled children and adults. We saw it, it is not. It is just not a good example. We need to accept and we need to learn from the mistakes that were made. We need to do better in monitoring. It cannot be just civil society monitoring. But also, when these things happen, you need to ensure accountability. When we flag there has been this investment, be accountable, stop the funding, and ask the government to do something, to provide remedies to the victims, to stop doing this the institutionalization that is not real institutionalization. And as we're in the moment that we're in, we also want the next EU regulations to have stronger safeguards to make sure that this stops happening in every country, not only in Bulgaria, but in every European Union country. Then to the managing authorities, so this is the Bulgarian authorities that are managing the EU funding at their level. We need to make sure that the EU CRPD is applied in all the programming and in all phases of EU funds use. So this means don't invest money in small group homes, don't invest money in daycare centers, don't invest money in shelter workshops, make sure that disabled people have a voice. Do all of this to make sure that the UN CRPD, which Bulgaria has ratified and the European Union has ratified is a reality. We need more capacity building because we need all of stakeholders to properly understand the UNCRPD, to stop thinking that small group homes are deinstitutionalization or independent living just because the buildings look nicer. And also we need, of course, for disabled people and for representative organizations to be involved. And then to the local authorities and the service providers, we need to end all of these investments into segregation, to stop new placements, and this also includes small group homes. Use the cohesion funding because this funding can be used for good things. We can use it to develop community-based services. We can use it to build more support, to improve access to mainstream services. We need to use all this money and use it properly. And again, to meaningfully involve disabled people and representative organizations because they are the experts and they are the ones that know how to do things and how to make independent living a reality. Oh, this one I repeat, sorry. And then just to the quality body, we also asked that there should be an inquiry on the misuse of EU funding. We want to make sure that also human rights frameworks in Bulgaria take this question seriously and can act based on our report and multiple other reports that exist before ours. Thank you very much. This is my email if you would like to contact me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Rita, for this interesting presentation of the report. I think for me, what seems really well key is that, I mean, sometimes the authorities only react when you find, you know, serious human rights abuses in places like torture and similar. And, you know, I'm glad you didn't find anything like that here, but it is also all these, let's say, more subtle human rights violations that are that we should also be looking for. So how do the people live in these places? What freedom do they have? Freedom of choice, freedom of control. Why are there fences and gates in front of these places? Why do they, you know, even exist? Why do they all have to do the same things? Why can they not move somewhere else? These are the things that we don't have much information about the life in these places. So it's great that you were able to bring some of that to us, and I would definitely encourage everyone to read the full report, of course, and to share it further with those who should read it. I also think it's really concerning that so many of these places now exist. If I remember correctly, there are over, I think, 140 of these group homes that have been built with EU funds over the last decade and more. And I'm not sure how many daycare centers there are, but these places are there now. So moving forward, what, you know, this money has been spent. There will be more funds for sure for Bulgaria in the future. It will mostly be for human resources. Will it go to only to the staff in these institutions? What can be done to really to get rid of these places? It's a very difficult situation. So I think we all need to continue working on that more. But these are just some reflections. If anybody has any questions or comments, please do leave them in the Q&A box or the chat box. Now, before we move on to Mitko, unfortunately, we were not able to not yet Mitko. We were not able to get anyone from group homes to speak today. It didn't work out time-wise. But we have a video we can show you. Now, this video was not made for this particular event. It was made by Validity Foundation and the network of experts, the NIE, for another event, for another conference, but we have the permission here to use it. And in this video, we can hear from some survivors of these places, for people from people directly affected by Bulgaria's so-called deinstitutionalization reform. You will not be able to see their faces, so you will just see, I think, again, some crafts, some drawing. So just so you know, there is nothing wrong with the video, but they are speaking anonymously. And so I would like to ask you, Rita, if you could play it for us. It is 8 minutes long.
Здравей!
Здравей!
Тук сме за да подготвим едно кратко видео, което да представим на хората, ще бъдат участници в събитието в понеделник, на 27 на доклада на політики в Будапеща с основен автор Надя Денева. Искате да поговорим малко за твоя опит в тази сфера, за твоите преживявания, начина по който
Да, бих искала да говорим и да помогна, ако е възможно.
Yes, I would like to talk and to help if possible.
Първото нещо, което трябва да бъде казано,
The first thing that needs to be said about the reality in Bulgaria with view of the people with disabilities is that we are considered as second rank people. We are paying taxes, we pay bills, electricity, water, internet, everything that healthy people do. The rest of the people are asked for their opinion. They are being heard and we are left speechless. Nobody cares about our opinion. We are obliged to give our share to society like the people without disabilities do. But when we need to receive from society, we are receiving a lot less than we give.
Нарушаване на права или аз не знам. Не разбирам от тези неща. Но за едните правилата са едни, за другите правилата са други.
Obviously, we have different rules for different groups. Another thing that I notice and I find very unfair is stigma. I mean the stigma of the people with disabilities.
С увреждане, извинявам се, не болни. Стигмата. Има много хора, които имат много голямо помощ, някои от тях дори осъзнават, понеже като кажат този е глуп или този е с някакви и хората не смеят да отидат да видят психиатър, примерно или просто защото било смешно. И до някъде тези хора са прави, защото винаги че психиатър е винаги че може да не се промениш чак толкова много. Отношението на хората може да се промени за теб, към теб, то за винаги няма да е в
different person after that, but the perception of you is forever changed for the worse. Then our country that is supposed to be our mother becomes our stepmother, and it doesn't even give you chances. I cannot comment more because I'm not an expert. I also want to have children to raise them here and to be helped by the state. We are part of society, but we want the same that is given to other people, healthy people.
Чак всички не знам, но всеки един човек всъщност би могъл да допринесе да стане живота по-добър, не само живота на хората с увреждания. Човек с увреждане да помогне на човек без увреждане да направи живота му по-добър. Защото аз всъщност съм имала такъв опит.
In fact, I have had such experience. I had bulimia for 20 years, and once a couple of years ago, I caught a friend of mine vomiting. I gave her my diary. I love keeping diaries. She gave it back to me 2 days later. She called me recently to tell me that she did not vomit anymore, and she even became a mother afterwards. So people with disabilities have their place in society, and they deserve respect. They don't deserve to be stigmatized.
Да сме просто наравно с останалите.
So we should be treated the way other people are treated.
Че повечето хора и с и без увреждания се чувстват застраховани, че няма да се разберат от нещо психическо.
feel that they are immune to mental diseases, but there is no such thing as a healthy person even in our society.
Да страдаш от физическа такава. Дори качеството си на живот понякога
Your quality of life is often even worse than living with physical disability when you have a mental disorder.
Нещо друго искаш ли да ти разкажа?
What else do you want to hear about?
Мисля, че каза много ценни неща.
I think you told me some very important things.
Съм изключително изненадана, че го направи
And I'm really surprised that you're so open and you were not prepared with the questions in advance. Could you tell me more about your experience with the social services available or not available in Bulgaria?
Не съществуват като подкрепа. Имах един лекар, който ми каза, има две възможности за нормален живот. Единият е да се минеш за Англия, понеже там, когато се разболееш по този начин, те пращат за един социален работник, един психотерапевт, един трудотерапевт, които не те изправят крака, не те вкарват в обществото, те не те отказват от теб. Като в България ти даваш толкова влезеш в болницата, да изтече клиничната пътина, най-грозно казано да вземат парите, които им се полагат и просто да платят някъде, като се разболели пак да постъпиш в болницата. А тези в България ги няма. Приятелите ми, които ги имат, са примерно
Some of the services that are available in other countries that here are not. A social worker comes to your place 5 to 7 times a week to check on you, to see if you are taking your medication, if your house is in order. They help you go out. Also takes you for coffee, to the cinema.
Не допускат ти да бъдеш изолирана от обществото. Това от какво имам нужда? На първо място
have a mental illness, you are isolated. What do I need? In the first place, I'd like to be integrated in society. I need a job suitable for me, not too easy, not too difficult. Because for some people, when you have a disorder, a disability, they think that you cannot do anything and you are paid for doing nothing. So I need a job suitable for me. And also, I need a place, flat.
Това, което държавата ми предлага в този случай, е да ме изпрати в център, в ЦНСТ. Вместо да ми помогне, на практика би им попречило, би ми направило още по-зависима, в днешната да бъда независима. Точно в това отношение държавата всъщност много бърка или по-скоро прави мечка услуга от средата, в която съм била напълно зависима. И аз не да кажа чак неадекватна, но съм била наистина много зависима. Тя ме изпраща на друго място, където не съм независима, където съм по-зависима, че е пълно с още 5-6 човека, които са зависими също от мен. Вече започват съвсем други трудности, понеже видяла с такива хора и наистина имам представа и опит какво е да живееш с хора, които са болни като теб, имат подобни проблеми, но всеки с характера си се получава от едно малко училище, една много
Thank you, Rita, for playing the video, and thank you to Validity Foundation and the network of experts for letting us use this video. It was with one person. Apologies, I said more people before. So we heard many important reflections there on how people are treated, what the system does to people, and what needs to be done. The message is, people need to be supported to live in the community, not in an institution. They need to be able to work. They have a lot to give to the society by being friends, colleagues, neighbors, fellow citizens. So yeah, I think it's a good contribution to this report presentation. I also wanted to say, because I don't think we've acknowledged all the very good photos, and the first video were made by our colleague Michael Goossens. So thank you also very much to him for his work. And now, Mitko, you can come on screen again. We will hear from Mitko, who is also personally affected by the whole deinstitutionalization in Bulgaria, because we are very happy that Mitko does not live in an institution, and he is a part of the independent living movement in Bulgaria. But as Mitko said in this video at the beginning of today's event, it does not take too much for a person to end up in an institution. And before giving the word to Mitko, I also wanted to acknowledge our great friend Kapka Panayotova, who did with her friends so much work to stop all this investment into group homes, into institutions, and so much fighting for independent living in Bulgaria for decades. And she died doing that, and unfortunately, we are still where we are. So Mitko now is going to tell us, I think, just his view over the whole thing as an also long-time independent living activist, and also Mitko, what you think needs to be done, what do people need in Bulgaria to live independently. So Mitko, the floor is yours.
Благодаря ти, Инес.
Thank you, Ines.
Толкова много неща се казаха в
We heard a lot of things
течение вече на един час.
for 1 hour
че не знам
now.
откъде да започна.
I don't even know where to
Може би трябва да се
start,
започне от началото на
but
процеса,
I will start from
за
the
да
beginning
стане
of this
ясно защо се
process
случи
to
така в
make it
България.
clear why this happened in Bulgaria. In brackets, I am very sad to speak about Bulgaria as a negative example in this case, but this is a real negative example. Unfortunately, the state continues to implement this model in future policies that are being developed in Bulgaria. We are very happy that there is such a report from ENIL, because you focused on the funding of these policies. Unfortunately, this is not the case only in Bulgaria. We have had campaigns such as no euro for DI, but unfortunately, this didn't produce results. I don't know whether we can change anything if people with disabilities do not start working actively, because if people with disabilities are not proactive, shouting out that they have there is disrespect for their rights, nothing will change. Actually, everything started in DI in Bulgaria with a video on BBC for a Mugilino institution. This was a horrible, horrific place. This documentary was broadcast in the 90s, I think, and it resulted in a strategic document vision for DI in Bulgaria. It laid the foundations of the process, but with the wrong policies and visions. Everybody believed that if such an institution has to be changed, then the premises, the building has to be changed. That is why they started redistributing people with disabilities and children to a number of such small group homes such as the sheltered homes,
observed homes and so on. There are different types of such homes, but they have the same stuff: social workers, surveillance of social workers, repression of social workers over the residents. And this was transferred to small group homes. And this is replicated in all services that we see in Bulgaria. We have always, for the past 15 years, we have always called for that, and we have written a number of reports that Bulgaria is not a good example of DI. Bulgarian policies are totally wrong when it comes to people placed in small group homes. There is a genocide against some people in those small group homes. In 2025, we saw that some people were tied to their beds in small group homes, not in a big institution. So nothing has changed. I don't know whether anything will change. I'm really sorry to say so, because policies in Bulgaria, institutions, ministries leading the process do not understand of the philosophy of independent living. They replace independent living for living on your own. People with disabilities feel neglected. As Rita said, they're forced, so to say, to go to such a small group home. Indeed, the system is the following: if you are not supported in the community, this is one of the main rules for independent living, you have to go to an institution. With Nadia Deneva, my colleague, we are discussing that I can go to a sheltered home because I don't have sufficient support in the community. Unfortunately, this is the horrible things that happens in Bulgaria. And this is the so-called good example of the Bulgarian model, put in ironic terms. On paper, actually, those places are excellent. In ministries' reports, in papers Bulgaria sends to the European Commission, you see that people feel integrated. They are not placed in big institutions. They are in the city center or in the center of their town and village. But the policy in place is the same. Our focus was namely this: we can build a golden cell, but we did not change the policies there. Instead of having social workers, people in residence rather need assistance to help them once they go out, rather than a social worker who tells you you are worth nothing, you are worthless, sorry. So these are the policies in those places. Actually, on paper, those small group homes have to provide temporary care for 3 years, and within 3 years the person must learn how to live in the community. But this doesn't happen because this person stays for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Nothing changes. As Rita says, and as the report shows, this person stays in this small group home. That is why in 2015, 2018, we tried to do something different, but it was not with EU funding. It was thanks to a private financing campaign. It was a project of our Center for Independent Living in Sofia. We tried to work with Lukovic small group home with 10 people, men and women. There was one bathroom, one toilet for those 10 people, and a separate toilet for the staff. With our project, we did the following, and I'm proud of it. This is an example how the DI services must develop. We created 8 individual kitchenettes, or not kitchenettes, but small studios with separate kitchenettes and toilets. So all these people had separate toilets and bathrooms. So using EU funds, you can build other types of premises, although this is not the best solution indeed. So the housing policy of municipalities may be changed. The state may create social services, and what I'm proud of. We installed bells on that small group home, because small group homes don't have bells. Can you imagine? If you have visitors, they can't come and call you. Indeed, in Bulgaria, money follows the resident. Once the person is in the small group home and the system, there is money for that person. Once it is a resident, there is money which is channeled in the direction of that person. But if the person wants to leave the small group home and there is no more money, there is no money to support this person outside the small group home, how can a person have the courage to leave and to exit the small group home and look for a job, look for a flat? Indeed, the state must provide adapted flats to such people in order to make sure once the resident is prepared by the social workers in the small group home, this will be possible and they will be able to go out. Actually, in many cases, municipalities are the only employers, and they apply for funding to build such small group homes. They hire staff for the small group homes, and they provide jobs for their local population. But this is at the expense of residents in those small group homes. You should be aware of it, and the European Commission must see it. If everything is excellent on paper, if the perception has to be changed, then the NEO team or other teams should come here and look what happens from inside. Of course, so we shouldn't have daycare centers with 15 people in the same room knitting, although, of course, knitting is a popular hobby in Bulgaria, or drawing together. But this is not a hobby for everyone. Instead of sending the money to that person so that this person can choose what to use it for a occupational therapist, for a psychologist, for example, or for another service, in the community-based service. Instead of helping me go and choose what to do, I am forced to go to such a daycare center where I should learn to knit and to sew. This is not my thing. Dear authorities, I want to develop. I want to learn computers, AI. I don't want to go to a daycare center and learn knitting. But unfortunately, parents in Bulgaria want to have daycare centers because this is the only option to leave their children with disabilities, no matter whether these are children under 18 or above 18, they may be 50, but many people leave them there in order to relax, in order to do something else. So this is the main problem in Bulgaria. We should think more about independent living, the quality of life, whether the quality of life of these people has improved as a result of these policies. If quality of life has not improved, then obviously we need to change something. This does not happen in Bulgaria, and we only record numbers of people who get access to social services. I don't want those social services. I want to improve quality of life. This is what we need to change in Bulgaria. Although, again, I will repeat, on paper, everything is excellent because all documents that regulate the work of those small group homes state that users and residents will be trained to have independent living. Social workers will attend training every year. Including lectures on the UNCRPD. And also they promise to provide individualized plans so that they are prepared for independent living. When a representative of the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy comes and sees that nothing happens in reality, then this should be a red flag for them, and they should be aware this is a wrong model that should not be replicated in future services. If the DI of children pro forma has been completed and there are no institutionalized children, although for us small group homes are also institutions, this model is replicated in other sectors, including the DI of adults. This is the main problem, how to stop it from happening. This is the job of NGOs now, and the job of those reports to point at the problem. I'm really sorry to speak in those dark terms about Bulgaria, but you should never quote Bulgaria as a good example when it comes to DI of children and adults with disabilities, because this is really detrimental for them. Of course, I can speak a lot more, but I will use bad words about the situation of people with disabilities. Hopefully, things will change. And as Ines said, I live in my own flat. I use my father as an assistant because independent living and the Personal Assistance Act was quite distorted in Bulgaria. It doesn't function well. people like me who are active, who have been fighting for 20, 25 years for independent living. I hope myself and other such people will not be forced to go such a goat sell, the so-called small group home. Thank you for listening to me. I will write my email in the chat box. If you have questions, I will be at your disposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitko, for that. And of course, we also hope that you never, ever end up in a place like we saw in the report, in the photos or anything similar. I maybe Mitko, you could come. I have been looking through the comments in the chat box, and thank you very much for those. There is a comment from Zuzana from the Czech Republic. She says that there is support also by organizations there is a similar problem as in Bulgaria, and there is support of organizations who claim to fight for the rights of disabled people for places like this. So I just wanted to ask a small question, Mitko. I wanted to ask you whether I know, of course, CIL Sofia has been fighting for a long time against institutions, but I was just wondering, other organizations of disabled people or for disabled people, is there any opposition to these places, or any kind of common wish and initiative to to close them, to try to fight against them, and to try to get the policy and law to support independent living. Maybe you could say a little bit, or if you know.
There are many NGOs working on this ground. Unfortunately, very few of them are advocacy organizations, because the state more and more finances services, and many NGOs have turned into service providers. So you can see many NGOs and many small group homes managed by NGOs, which were fighting for independent living. Unfortunately, when they become service providers, they forget what is independent living, and of course they are obliged to receive their financing through delegated budgets, and they stop developing independent living concepts. Of course, there are unions of mothers of children with disabilities. They advocate it, and they were quite outspoken about the Personal Assistance Act. We wrote that bill, actually, and they changed it in such a way that 99% of personal assistants in Bulgaria are actually parents. So indeed, there are very few organizations which are real advocate organizations who fight and promote the philosophy of independent living. Unfortunately, very few of us are working on this ground. It is more and more difficult for us, although for 25 years now, we've been trying to show what is independent living, and and we've been trying to reform Bulgaria's policy, but without results.
Thank you, Mitko. Yeah, extremely difficult to fight against this if you are on your own, if you don't have much support, and if you have other organizations and groups like family members or mothers wanting something different. I think also because people don't have proper support to live independently. I mean, perhaps they're stuck at home without any support. It really limits their advocacy, right? Potential. I mean, their power to get out and do something. So it's a difficult situation. So I think it's also the job of ENIL and other organizations to try to support this and to advocate to support CIL Sofia and to advocate against this in Brussels. I have a question now. I don't see questions in the Q&A. We have some other comments, about people shouldn't be forced to work. Absolutely. That is an issue in some countries, that people are forced to work in order to get support or to get benefits. That is not good either. But whoever can work and wants to work should be able to work and become financially independent, or just have funds to live independently with support, of course. Now I would like to bring in Rita again before we close this webinar, and to ask her. So it is not just up to NGOs to monitor the use of EU funds, even though in practice it is a little bit like that. But on paper and in regulations, there are so-called monitoring committees established for the different operational programs. I would like to ask Rita the question whether the issue of investing in institutions has been somehow, addressed or challenged by the relevant monitoring committees in Bulgaria, or what kind of role do they play in this process?
Yes, thank you, Ines. This was something we discussed, and it is included in the report because we had a discussion about this with European Commission. Tanya can also add on this if she wants. This was a very tense discussion because on their view, the monitoring committee had never objected in Bulgaria. The monitoring committee is in charge particularly of this, of monitoring what are called the enabling conditions and also of the funding. Sometimes the issue is that monitoring committees do not receive enough information to begin with. And sometimes the issue is also that there are no actual disabled people organizations in the monitoring committees, which is the case of Bulgaria. The Commission argues that in the monitoring committee, there are these disability organizations, but they are service providers. They're not actually representative of disabled people. But in their view, because there are no complaints from the monitoring committee, everything is fine and everything is going according to plan. And if we want to do something, we need to speak to the monitoring committee, or organizations need to be involved in these committees. Not everybody has the capacity to be involved. Not everybody has the knowledge or just the resources. So we end at a very strange situation in which we alert them that this is happening. The European Commission blames the managing authorities blames the Commission, and everybody says the monitoring committee is not doing anything. So we have no results. But it was a very difficult discussion we had with the Commission. If Tanya wants to add anything on this.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. I don't know. Yeah, if Tanya, feel free to come in. This was to be my second question, because I know, although the report has just been published, so I know we have not asked the European Commission for the response yet, but after the study visit, I know that Rita and colleagues from Bulgaria did have a meeting with the Commission to present the outcomes of the study visit. That was my question, and maybe Rita, I don't know if there is anything more you could add other than sort of blaming it on the monitoring committees, whether they recognized in some way, that this is problem, or that investments, that funds went into the wrong projects?
We had two different meetings and they were extremely different. The first one was with a representative from DG Regio. DG Regio is in charge of building of the funds that build the places themselves. And this was the desk officer for Bulgaria. He was quite new, and I would say he was quite open, but didn't have a lot of knowledge. So he was not aware that this was an issue and that this was happening. He was open to listening to us. But so it was still a productive meeting, but we felt like there was no awareness. It was the opposite impression when we met with DG Employment. They are in charge of the human resources development. And they were aware because they knew our previous reports. They knew the reports that all the different organizations had done. They were angry about these reports. And they kept saying, but what do you want us to do? You just blame us and don't offer us solutions. You don't do things the right way, was a bit the message. They were saying that we were too disruptive or that we were giving them issues. So it was a bit tense in all honesty. And there was a lot of blaming and not a lot of solutions. This is also included in the report, although with probably nicer words. And yeah, I cannot say that they certainly knew, which is maybe still a positive outcome, that we know that they are receiving what we send them and they read it. But I'm not sure they acknowledge that is a problem. And I think this also comes from what I said in the beginning. They visit these small group homes and they think they look nice because they don't know what independent living means. So I think that's where we need to do the work.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. And yes, Stephen Allen from Validity Foundation. Good to see you, Stephen. He said, do they ever read all the recommendations that we make? Because we have the solutions, in fact. But yeah, we are not the Bulgarian government, so we cannot make the changes that we want. Somebody else who has more power than us, which is the commission, and the government can do them. Yeah, go ahead, Mitka.
Only to comment about the monitoring committees of the operational programs. In the field of policies, we are discussing Kapka Panayotova, who was mentioned. Unfortunately, she is departed, but she was a member of the monitoring committee. Of course, people there should be aware of everything that is happening. Kapka mentioned it and pointed at it many times. But the monitoring committee follows a very peculiar principle. It's a quota principle. NGOs, 2 or 3 NGOs, have a rotation principle of attending those monitoring committees. For 6 months, one organization attends it, then another NGO attends it, and so on. And if they're not advocacy organizations, then monitoring committees may have a member, an organization saying that everything is perfect because this organization is a service provider. So they vote in such a way and they make sure the operational program provides funding in future. So the monitoring committee is an excellent place for discussion, but in Bulgaria, we have people who just refuse to hear us, to listen to us.
Thank you, Mitko, for adding that further insight into the work of the monitoring committees. On the other hand, of course, so the monitoring committees may not have the right people, may not have the power. We know who has the power to do something. We know it is, of course, the Bulgarian government. We know it is also the European Commission, which needs to make sure that the funding of EU taxpayers goes into the rights guaranteed by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but they so far refuse to do that. So let's hope. I mean, our plan definitely at ENIL is to use this report to push further, to continue working on this. I see many colleagues here who do the same thing, so we continue working together. I like Kevin's call for no to compulsory knitting, absolutely no to anything compulsory, including knitting. So yes, we just have to persist. Of course, there's always talk. Now we are talking about the next round of the EU budget post 2027. But this is always kind of a tendency to say, okay, we will try to make things better in the future. We will try to put in safeguards. Those of us who have been here for a while, we know this is said before every new funding period, but without real understanding of what does it mean to live independently, what is needed for people to live independently, why are institutions, including small group homes, why are they not the right solution? Without really understanding of that, nothing is going to help us. Without the real willingness and determination to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, nothing will ever change. It will all stay on paper. So yeah, well, finally, there is a comment from Aneta. One of the problems is that no efforts to change the reality out of the institutions. Of course, the real support, universal design, and the authorities explain that there is no way to ensure inclusion. But yes, if we don't invest into proper, not just support, but also making society accessible, into making jobs accessible, into just making everything accessible and inclusive of everyone, regardless of what support needs they have. Of course, without those alternatives, the institutions will always be the only choice, as Mitko already said. So we have to work on that. We are at the end, so I will stop talking. And once again, well, first of all, I would like to thank everybody who was here with us today. We use the webinar format, so it's a little bit not very interactive, but so that you were here. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for Rita for working on this report and presenting it to us. Thank you to Michael for all the visuals and the videos. And thank you to colleagues in Bulgaria also for making the whole study visit possible, to gain access into these places, to be able to speak to people. Without that, there would have been no study visit and no report. So really many thanks to Aneta and Tanya, and if there are other colleagues here, sorry if I missed you. And thank you finally to Mitko and CIL Sofia, not just for being here today, but for being there in Bulgaria and for doing all that you are doing. And we will stay with you and try to support you as best as we can. And finally, sorry, thank you to our interpreter, Bulgarian interpreter, Gabriela, I think. Gabriela Tsekova, thank you as well. We will, in addition to the report, we will publish this recording both in English and in Bulgarian, and feel free to share, and also feel free to reach out to ENIL with any questions or comments or ideas. So I think we can close, unless you want to say the final word, Rita.
Well, just again, thank you to everybody. It's been great to show this report, and I really hope we can make a difference in Bulgaria and in the rest of Europe, so we stop investing all of this money in the small group homes and in these daycare centers and put it into something that is meaningful and that is real independent living and inclusion.
Thank you, Rita. So on that note, have a great evening, everyone, and see you soon somewhere online or in person. Bye-bye.